Welcome, everybody, to the Big Book Roundtable and the RICO 12 Family of Recovery Resources. And we're grateful to have all of you here, no matter where you're from, what your beliefs are, what addictions or afflictions you may suffer from. RICO 12 is a resource for all of you. And we strive to really share this and share experience, strength, and hope, reflecting light from whatever our higher power may be. And we're going to continue today with Nikki M. and David G. around this virtual roundtable in the chapter We Agnostics. Before we get into our reading, let's do a quick introduction here. Nikki, why don't you jump in and Nikki, jump in and say hi and introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, I'm Nikki M. And according to David G., I'm the prettiest girl in the room, but I happen to be the only girl in the room too. So I'm just grateful to be here. And this life is amazing. Thank you.
Yes, and Nikki, you are the prettiest girl in the room, surrounded by a couple of trolls who just try to move along here in life and hopefully not scare too many people with our looks. David, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, guys. Good to be able to laugh. I'm David G. I'm an alcoholic and an addict of many sorts from Oklahoma, and I'm really grateful. My sponsor once gave me a cup for I think my 20th birthday. It says, "Thank you, God, for the laughter today, but please never let me forget the tears that brought me to that." So good to be here.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, David. All right. As what we do in this Big Book Roundtable is we sit around, we read line by line through the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. We left off last time in We Agnostics on page 45, and we're going to continue our reading today through page 46 and get more into this concept of a power greater than self. Dig deeper into step 2. And then we'll have a little discussion on that. So grab your big book, highlighter, pen, paper, take some notes. And if you have questions or comments, please feel free to reach out. You can send an email to RICO12pod, RECO12pod at gmail.com. And if for whatever reason you are feeling a prompting, a pushing to support us, you can support RICO12 by going to RICO12.com /support, or check out the links in the show notes and support us. We have a lot of these services, and there is a cost to them, and we appreciate any support you can offer if you can afford that without breaking yourself. All right, here we go. Page 45. We'll start at lack of power. That was our dilemma. We go through page 46, where we will end off to all men, which is the bottom of page 46. So we're going to do a little over a page and a half. Here we go. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves, obviously. But where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. That means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Here, difficulty arises with agnostics. Many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God. For we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. We know how he feels. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him which someone had tried to impress them during their childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. We look upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance at many individuals who claimed to be godly. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Yet, in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by starlit night, who then made all of this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. Yes, we of agnostic temperament have had these thoughts and experiences. Let us make haste to reassure you. We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudice and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commenced to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with Him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek Him. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive, or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men. Now, there's a lot we covered there, and maybe we want to consider cutting that in half, but we'll see. We'll see what we do here. But I want to get into this, and David, talk to us a little bit about some of the things that as we read through this, we want to dive deeper on.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, this is so powerful. It's lack of power. See, not lack of belief, not lack of choice, lack of power. If I'm powerless, obviously the answer to that is power. If insanity is driving me out the door against my will over and over and over, then obviously sanity is the answer. So the answer is found in step 2. However, if I don't continue to practice the other 10 steps, I don't stay in this solution. I'll fall back into the hopelessness, which is step 1, and I'm going again. And that was my story for years. So lack of power is my dilemma. How the hell am I going to get it back? And I didn't know that. You know, there again, I thought lack of belief, lack of faith, lack of trust, lack of all these things. I thought that was the problem, but it's not. It's lack of power. I got to find a power by which I can live. You know, obviously, where am I going to find it? Well, when we get to page 55 in this book, it's going to tell us exactly where it is. But right now it says that's what the book's about. Not the fellowship, not my sponsor, not the book. The main object of this book is to enable me to find a power greater than self, not that will help me to solve my problem, will solve it. So it says, you know, it means we've written a book we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. That just means good and bad conduct. And it means, of course, we're going to talk about God. Now, God's eternal. And we're going to see that coming up pretty soon. God's eternal, devil's eternal. All these things are eternal. But these are the things. If these terms is what's bothering us, then we need, our book's going to tell us we need to look exactly at what they mean to us. And then hold it up to the light and say, does this serve me anymore? Is it okay for me to get rid of this, despite what my religious teachings or any of that, you know, may have tried to teach me when I was younger? So my experience with this is I just kept fighting it, especially in the Christian realm. I just hated all that stuff. And but my views have changed on that now because of what I find in this book. I love it says many times we talk to the new man and watch his hope rise when we discuss the fellowship. But his face falls when we speak of these spiritual matters. Why? Because of fear. People have scared us of God. Here's my take on that. It's time we unlearn the things that we learned and were taught by those who were wounded. The people that taught me about God, hell, they were wounded. And I didn't realize that. Some of them had sex addiction. Some of them had alcoholism. Some of them had a lot of secrets in their life. Some of them were codependent, you know, I mean, and they're trying to teach me about God. And what I come to learn is the term God isn't, or Jesus, it isn't so much that I hated him and I couldn't accept him. See, that's what self had convinced me was the deal. But here's the deal. I couldn't accept the way that they was presenting him to me. So there came a day when I said, it's okay for me not to believe the way they taught me. I can believe what I've learned in this book, and that changed my life. That radically changed. I absolutely come to believe in something greater. So the book says we know how he feels. We've shared that doubt and prejudice. We're going to keep a good eye on that word. To others, the word God. There we are again, going into words. We're going into terms. That's all it is. If that's bothering you, look at why. Here's why, according to the book. To others, the word God brought up a particular key word right here. Idea of him. What needs to change? The idea. Hell, God don't need to change. The idea of him needs to change. That's what had to change for me. And here's why, because someone who was wounded tried to impress that on me during childhood, and they did a pretty good job of it because I lived with that conception for many years. With that rejection, I imagine, there's the key word. Self is made up of imaginings, conceptions, all these different things. There it is again. With that rejection, self imagined that I had abandoned the God idea. There it is again, entirely. So, I mean, we're going to see it over and over and over. I mean, we could pick this apart with words, and I'm not going to do that. But I'm just saying in 2019, after getting my tail beat over and over and over and over through the years with lust, I finally point blank asked a man who was not even an addict, why can I not recover? Why? I've tried everything. I've done everything they told me to in Alcoholics Anonymous. I've worked the steps the way I did to get sober from alcohol and drugs. I went to sweat lodges. I went to, hell, I've been dunked. I've been sprinkled. I've been prayed over. I've done all these things. I swore to God on the Holy Bible with my hand that I would not do that again. And I went out and did it. And and I'm dying. And he said, did you ever look at the things that maybe drove you to do that stuff? The thoughts, the ideas. And that was all new to me. And I said, no. And he said, well, let's read the book. And we began to read the book. And, my mind says, he don't need to read the book to you. You had Charlie P., for God's sakes, of Joe and Charlie. You know how to read the book. Thank God that the power overrode that. But our first exercise is right here on page 46 in this chapter. And this is something that I make my guys do. If you don't do this, then we don't move on. It says we were bothered with the thought. Boy, there's the key, huh? That faith and dependence upon power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak. Why would I think that? Even cowardly. And it goes on down, and as you read toward the bottom, it says this. Yet in other moments, we found ourselves thinking, shit, man, I'm on a hill from that. When enchanted by starlit night, who then made all this? There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it's fleeting and soon lost. And that's kind of like my recovery on self-will. It's fleeting and soon lost. And so here's the exercise. Think of a time when you just had one of those aha moments and you were completely at peace. And all of a sudden, something come in behind that, a thought, robbed that from you. I was at the Grand Canyon in 2010 with my wife. We were overlooking, just this massive hole in the earth. Beautiful, beautiful. And I was lost. I was caught up in that moment. And a thought came to mind. You get too close to the edge, it's about 5 miles to the bottom of that, and you're dead. Boom. That experience was gone immediately. Like he says here, it's fleeting and soon lost. So what we do is we look at times in our lives whenever we've had that, we look at what come in to rob us of that. And now we're going to start to focus on what robs us from that so we can begin to have more and more of those. And I don't want to take up too much time. I want to hear my friend Nikki, but nobody can fully define or comprehend that power, which is God. So the preacher man, I love him. Don't try to comprehend and define that to me. You can't. I know. But much to our relief, and let me tell you, it was a relief, a huge relief. I don't need to consider his conception. The book says, be quick to see where religious people are right. It doesn't say be quick to see that they are right. My own conception, however inadequate, was, and look at this, to make the approach. I was told I could never approach God. Never. Not only approach him, hell, effect a contact with him. But here are some of the things that I've got to take a look at because the book is going to call them prejudged ideas, prejudice, creative intelligence, spirit of the universe. But look at this promise. We begin to be possessed. I've been possessed by many things: drug addiction, alcoholism, sexaholism, all these. I've been possessed by all that. But the book says, no, now you're going to be possessed by a new sense of power and direction. But there's a condition, and here it is, provided you take the other simple steps, 3 through 12. And if you don't do that, good luck. God don't make too hard of terms to those who seek him. The realm of the spirit, which is within me, last place I'd ever looked, it's all inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. And am I one of those? You bet. We believe it's open to all men. Where I grow up is the Bible Belt here in the South. There's only one way to God, and you better find that way. And if you don't, that's it. My book says, no, we believe that's open to all men. All men. There's some conditions, but that's not one of them. So I'm so grateful for this, man. It's changed my life in a radical way, and I'm just really grateful to be here. Sorry if I shared so long.
David, it's good, and we're covering a lot in that. So I appreciate your in-depth share with that. And I got a lot out of it. I took a lot of notes. Nikki, what are some of the things that jump out at you as we read through that?
Oh, I'm just so grateful, and I love to hear David. I actually like to follow after him. So this is a great episode for me because he does go through this stuff so great. And I won't go over it again, what he's already talked about, but that's what this book is about. See, I couldn't find how to get better any other way. And I don't know if it was this episode or last episode, but David said, like, don't have any other books. And that's what I tell people, only have your big book out because no other books helped you. If they did, you wouldn't be here with me with this blue book, the white pages and the black ink. You wouldn't be here. So when we get into talking about God, because I know I have no power. Why? Well, in my fellowship, we have a thing called the log and loser list. And on the log list, it's all the human aid list. It's all the human aids, the easier, softer ways, all that good stuff that you've tried to get better. And it lists every human aid and you just check it off. That saves hours with my sponsee of telling war stories. It's like your willpower, your ill health, this even your detox didn't work. Having another baby, Nikki, didn't keep you safe. Being smart, having a sponsor, knowing the big book, it will all fail me. So I know power. I have no power. I know this. I'm armed with the facts, and I know I've lost everything in my disease. So when we're going to talk about God, and we are going to talk about God, I just give them a new term, and I give them the spiritual principles. Interchange it. We're going to talk about humility. We're going to talk about you being polite and respectful to yourself and others. We're going to talk about you having gratitude, the obsession of it, because you have an obsessive mind. I need you to obsess about gratitude. See, my sponsee doesn't know how to walk, talk. Some of them don't even know how to make a bed. We're just learning how to live. So we're going to talk about God. Yeah, you don't like the word God? We're going to talk about helping others, being generous. We're going to talk about your forgiving and your loving and your patience and you being a responsible adult for once. Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about you growing or dying. There's your acronym for God. You need to grow or die. Okay, so that's how I just get through that whole God talk. And let's just get to page 46 because David did a pretty good run through on page 45. But I like this top paragraph, where it says the thought of faith and dependence is weak. That's me. Because why? I'm a judger. I like to judge everybody. So my top, where I wrote my line out, it says, judgment blocks me. I need to surrender and abandon myself. It's like everyone knows the Chinese farmer story. And if you don't, you can Google it. And it's like, I don't know. I have to live in that space. Oh, this is great, Nikki. I don't know. This is awful, Nikki. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if religious people are right or don't know. So how do I get to this point? And I love that exercise, David. Thank you. I'm going to really think about that because that's me too. I'll be staring at something great like my child and then go, oh no, what happens if he dies? There goes the instant moment because I got a sick mind. Second paragraph here on page 46 where it says, as we found that as soon as we were able to, number one, lay aside your prejudice. And I'm going to go real deep here. Lay aside your prejudice, not only about God, about everything. I've just recently laid aside my prejudice about, I don't even know what shape the world is. That's how much I'm exploding. They've told me it's round, but do I know that? I don't know. Let me lay aside my prejudice and do some research on that. Not just about God, about people, about everything I've ever known. Then I have to express, number two, I have to express a willingness to believe. That's all, a willingness. And then I'll get results. There's a lot of promises on this page. I got a lot of pink highlights here. I like to highlight my promises in pink. Okay. So here it says, we get results. That's a promise. That's a fact. I get results, even though I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know God. I just do what the book says. And I love this bottom paragraph. And this is why me, Nikki M, I feel like I'm welcome in every room. If I know my book, Because when they say, Nikki, you're not allowed in here because you do this, you do that, you're not a real alcoholic. They don't read this part. To us, the realm of the spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive. So don't tell Miss Al-Anon she can't be here. Don't tell the food eater that they've got to go to OA or FA when they just need to be in this room with this book. We are never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly, there's a key word, earnestly. Are you earnestly seeking God? Because that's what I ask people who are sober. I love David's story, of course. You're sober 20 years. Sir, are you earnestly seeking God? Because it seems like you're seeking women, food, scrolling. You need to be right. That's what I'll tell my people suffering who are sober. You're earnestly seeking your money, your validation. You aren't earnestly seeking God. Oh, Nikki, I hate the word God. You're not earnestly seeking being generous, being responsible, being kind, being loving, being forgiving, being accepting, tolerant, respectful of yourself and others. Let's get into this book and do it. I do a role play. I'm not sponsoring now, but that's how I get weird. And this right here, I love this page and I love that last part because everyone has a seat at this table.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. And I'm going to jump in here too. I do have a couple of questions that I'll ask, but really quick. One of the most powerful, one of the very powerful experiences in my recovery was working with a sponsor who was a self-proclaimed atheist communist and was like, I just can't believe in God that is defined by so many people. But when we get to this part here, he says, and his experience is, it's impossible for me to fully define or comprehend this power that works for me. But it does. When I rely on a power, whatever he calls that power, it works. And to hear him pray the Serenity Prayer or any of the other prayers is like hearing angels singing. It was a very eye-opening and heart-opening experience for me to work with somebody who said, I'm absolutely an atheist, but there is a power greater than me that I can't define that works when all other measures fail. And I love that. Anyways, quick question. Let's go to David. David, you mentioned this, and this is super powerful, and it was a big eye-opening experience for me when I had this same awakening. Talk to us about the power of accepting that those who taught you about God were wounded also, and how that opened your eyes to being able to accept more about this power greater than self.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, Justin. And, there's going to be an exercise coming out at the top of the very next page. In the next episode, we'll go more in depth into it. This is where I really began to see my grandmother, bless her heart, sure she's resting in peace, was a very codependent woman. She was very sick and let others manipulate her. But yet she was one who really tried to teach me about God. You have to be this way and you have to be that way. And if you're not, then that's it for you. You're going to be at the end. And my mother, who is so religious, did nothing but marry abusive alcoholics all of her life. In fact, one that I ended up taking his life. And I can remember them saying such things to me as that, you don't do that, he will punish you for that. And that's the kind of stuff, that I was being taught. I can remember someone telling me, you know what, you've taken a man's life. You'll die and burn in hell the rest of your life unless you do this and unless you do that. And then I would look at their life. And in one instance, the guy was running around on his wife. He was sleeping around with other people, So, if, we read, I think it was like, if a mere code of morals, if that's going to save you, then your ass is gone too, same as mine. And so what I began to see is that wounded people were the ones who were teaching me about, they had good intentions. I'm not saying that they had very good intentions, but what they were teaching me about the way that they were presenting God to me is what was wrong. It's not that, God loves you, this, that's, that's all great. But I had to come to my own conception of this power. And we read it here. One of the exercises that one of my sponsors through the years did to me He had me to write out in the margin of my book. He said, write conception, the word conception, and then I want you to draw a blank box about that big. And he said, here's the deal. I want your conception. It can't be anything you've ever read, anything you've ever listened to, anything anyone has ever taught you, anything, none of that. It has to be your conception. That box stayed blank for 25 years. I couldn't. Every time I would think of something, oh, I remember he said that. Oh, shit, I remember I read that over there. Well, you gave us the answer today when you read it in the book, in the middle of page 46. It says, it was impossible for any of us to fully or define that or comprehend that power, which is God. So God is power, power is God. Power. Lack of power. That's my dilemma. This really starts making sense now. I'm going to recover from self here, and what am I going to recover from? The thoughts, the ideas, and the concepts about this God that I've created. Come to find out, self has created this God and had me so scared of him that I only obey self. Hell, self has become my God. So now I get a chance to recover from that through these pages. So yeah, people that are wounded, they put a lot of these ideas in my head when I was little. And like it said back in the last episode, you read it. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of him, which someone had tried to impress during childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular keyword conception because it seemed inadequate. And with that rejection, we imagined we'd abandoned the God idea altogether. That's exactly what I was taught. So I've recovered from that now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. Nikki, question for you. You often, and I hear you talk about this, and you mentioned this in your share just now, that you will change the terms there. If God gives you trouble, let's talk about humility. Let's talk about love. Let's talk about these things and replace that term with those spiritual principles. Talk to us a little bit more about the practice of doing that and the power you find in doing that.
Oh, that's a great question. And thank you. And thank you, David, for just everything you're sharing. Okay, my sponsees come in, and myself too. I didn't have a conception of God. I don't know these things. Like you said, you can't define this. What the book says, you can't do it. So, I'm okay, Nikki, I'm going to go out and be more loving. Well, what does that look like? See, what does humility look like? I'm going to go out and be kind. That's I tried that for years. I need some action. So what I will do, and I've done a Rico 12 speaker tape, and it's called The Spiritual Principles in Action. So my sponsee doesn't like the word God. So I give him the spiritual principles, because every step comes with the spiritual principle. There's the 12 steps, the 12 principles. So let's just start with humility. Well, what does that look like? Okay, well, I'm going to get more humble, Nikki. Okay, so what it looks like, because that's getting closer to God. What does that look like? Well, you're going to, how about the next time you're at the dinner table with your family, you're going to listen. That's an action that you can put into humility. Like, you know what I mean? Or how about next time you go to a meeting, you're not going to be the first to share. Why don't you have God sit on your tongue? There's an action. Why don't you're going to get humble. You think you know everything because you're Mr., you're Mr., Jewish guy, you're Mr. Muslim, you're Mr. Christianity, you're Miss Yogini. Why don't you put everything there, get humble, and why don't you go and read the Quran and you're a Christian? Go and do, I get them into action, because it's like, oh, I'm so grateful. Well, how are we displaying our gratitude today? We're not just saying we're grateful. We have all got up, suited up, showed up, taken, almost 2 hours out of our time to be here, excited, enthusiastic, all the things that's how we show. We're not just going to say we're grateful. Like, how do you show your gratitude to Rico 12? You guys are learning, the listeners out there. Are you showing your gratitude through your seventh? Like that, this is radical stuff. Are you literally just listening to the podcast every week, or are you putting your seventh in? Like these are the spiritual principles and actions. So that's how I get my sponsee started right from the beginning. Even, like David and you both do when you sponsor, you throw them right into steps 10, 11, and 12. Well, then let's get into action right now by putting these spiritual principles and attaching them to 3 action items. You see, and then they're accountable, because accountability is important. So I hope that answers the question. I know I've heard over the years, everyone's like, I'm going to get more loving. Well, what does that look like, madam?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nikki. All right. I think we'll start wrapping this up. Is there any other final comments or insights that, David, you want to jump in and share before we start wrapping up?
Yeah, if I can get off mute here. And I just want to say thank you, and thank you, Nikki, and thank the listening audience for coming out each week for this. It's a great pleasure to be here. I get to speak at a lot of conferences and do a lot of big book studies and stuff like that. And I always say, coming here to speak is really the easy part. What goes on behind the scenes is where the work is. And Justin, that's you. And I appreciate you so much for all that you do, for having us here each week with this, for working around our schedules, making this happen, not only for me and her, but for God knows how many. A lot of guys have come to me and said, hey, I heard you guys on Rico 12. You guys are doing something I'm not doing. Can you sponsor me? Well, let's go to page 90 and take a look at that. So keep coming back, guys. It's great. So thank you, Justin.
Thank you, David. Very kind. Nikki, how about you? Do you have any final thoughts here?
Well, my final thought really is that I have to lay aside my prejudice on everything. I have to come to this table, to all tables, like a child who knows nothing. I'm a little child that's loving and ready to learn every single day. And I have to stay there and lay aside all my prejudice. I don't know. I just don't know. And what I thought was awful, like, let's just go to the example of COVID, has actually literally, oh, it's so awful. It's actually turned out to be the greatest time for me. It's led me into a deeper dive into this big book. It led me to you guys. I am just overflowing with gratitude today. Boop, boop, be do.
Thank you, Nikki. And my quick takeaway from this has to do with the change of perception and of heart that happened as I jumped into and opened my mind to the big book and the conception of God, and what David talked about earlier, that the people who teach me about God are wounded, just like me. And that has changed the way I read the big book, the way I view pretty much every human being, and the way I read about, mortals from all the holy scripture writing that is out there. I look at them as imperfect people, just like me, who are trying to do their best to share what they have found that works with them. And I get to see, that they're stumbling, bumbling, but beautifully and perfectly loved children of God, just like me. Everybody keep opening your mind to a new way to see things. Abandon that closed way of mind, that closed thinking that you may have based on religious or non-religious upbringings. And as you open your mind and come into these rooms, great things will happen. Work it. You are worth it.